Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Talent Talk. It's exactly 1 o'clock, and as is traditional with these Talent Talks, we're going to start at about 3 minutes past. The reason for that is that typically about 70% of the people who are going to dial in will dial in between now and about 3 minutes past. So please sit tight, and we'll get started very soon. Okay, thanks everybody for being patient. We're going to get started now. It's 3 minutes past 1. So I'm Adam Gordon from candidate.ID, and I wanted to just start by saying it's a wonderful day today because as of last night, Scotland are one step closer to the World Cup finals for the first time in about 100 years, and that's why it's one of the reasons why it's a brilliant day today. The other reason why it's a brilliant day today is because we're doing this talent talk with Polly Barnes. So Polly and I have known each other for a couple of years. We've worked together, and Polly has got quite an interesting background in that she's been working in international organizations in HR talent acquisition, although began her career very much in advertising and marketing, and takes a lot of the thinking from how you engage people from advertising and marketing into the work that she does in talent. So it's interesting the way Polly and I were just talking about how there's not one kind of linear route into talent acquisition, and there's so many different ways that people can get into it. And Polly knows somebody who was an actor who's now in talent acquisition. I know somebody who was a broadcast journalist until a few years ago is now in talent acquisition, and so it's really interesting the way the skill set is developing and how everything's going. So, talent engagement, employee engagement. We're going to talk about the journey. We're going to talk about two aspects of the journey. I'm going to talk a little bit about the new candidate journey, and then I'm going to hand over to Polly, who's going to talk a bit about the employee journey and how it looks for different people and how organizations should adapt. So, getting started on the candidate journey, things have changed, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a talent pool, a talent pipeline, and a talent community. A talent pool is a database. As far as I'm concerned, it's a database. A talent pipeline exists when you understand who's cold, who's warm, and who's hire ready. A talent community exists when everybody within that community can engage with each other. So that might be a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, or it could be, there's all sorts of different versions of a talent community. So that's just, I'm not saying these are the absolute factual definitions, but these are my definitions. So when I talk about it a bit further, that'll explain what I mean. So in terms of that new candidate journey, let's call it recruitment content. It would have been effectively recruitment advertising. For me, when I was a recruiter back in 1999, it was a lineage advert in the Glasgow Herald. For other people in posher recruiting roles, it might have been an advert in the Financial Times or the Sunday Times or a trade publication. There wasn't really much else you could do unless you were at Office Angels and you had a jobs bus or an A-board outside your shop front or something like that. There wasn't a lot you could do to really make candidates aware about opportunities. So candidates needed to talk to humans to go through the education, the consideration, and the application process. Now, however, their journey is entirely different. They can become aware of opportunities through adverts on social media, on job boards, and elsewhere. They can educate on a career site. They can more deeply consider on things like LinkedIn or Glassdoor or the Muse, and they can get tons of great information about what it's like to work at your organization before they decide whether or not they want to talk to a human. So the job of a recruiter, as far as I'm concerned, the job of a recruiter has shifted from from 3 of these 4 segments down into the 4th, and that's the stage where the person wants to apply for the opportunity. So how do you adapt? What does the new candidate journey look like? So the candidate is on Twitter and they happen to see an advert. They then go onto the company's Twitter careers page, which then takes them onto the company's careers site. They then go onto the company's corporate site and find out, is the company doing well? What's its strategy all about? They then go and look at where might their locations, so where might opportunities exist. Then they go and take a look at what does the company stand for from a corporate social responsibility perspective. They then look in more detail at the career site, the EVP, and career stories. They take a look at the job description. They look at the hiring manager's LinkedIn profile. They look at the company's page at the Muse or at Glassdoor. Oh, they do both. They look at the recruiter and the recruiter's LinkedIn profile to work out, do we have any shared contacts? Is this somebody I'm going to be able to engage with? And then they go on to uniform dating. What I'm showing here is the journey is non-linear. We can't really map it. People can do huge amounts of research and then not apply for whatever reason. But if we can see what they've been doing before they decide to go into uniform dating, that's really, really valuable insight, and it's going to help us as recruiters to understand who was going and taking a look at all of our online content, who was researching and trying to work out what we're all about. So who do you call first? If John's looking at your emails, John's clicking on, occasionally clicking on links from that email, but then doing nothing, whereas Jane is going and looking at your emails, clicking on links, looking at your careers page, your culture page, looking at the hiring manager, and looking at job descriptions, you know that Jane is more engaged than John. If you've got John and Jane, you call them both. But if you've got 200 people, of which 180 are Johns and 20 are Janes, you call the Janes. So it helps you to really, really prioritize your time spent when you start to be able to nurture people and understand what they're actually doing. So using most sort of CRM or what I call MailChimp type technology, you're able to see what John's done, which is that John's opened an email and John's clicked on a link. You might not be able to see what John's done from there or what Jane's done from there. What Talent Pipeline software is able to show you is that John's done nothing and Jane's done absolutely loads. So that's kind of why we exist. To make this kind of thing work, I need, okay, so how does this work? We're able to use email email technology, IP recognition, and what we call fingerprint technology to track candidates around the internet, and that helps us to understand, you know, exactly what they're looking at. Now, the purpose of this is not just so that you can understand which candidates are hot. This is also to really understand what content works best, what channels work best, what content formats work best, what days of the week work best, and that helps you to become much, much better at nurturing talent over the medium term. It helps you to really refine your employer brand, your talent attract, and all of your other talent attraction kind of suite. This is an example of a type of nurture campaign that an organization would do to nurture. In this case, it's clinical project managers. So it's all about starting off with kind of thought leadership type stuff, and then maybe more about careers, and then a soft consider us, and then the more sort of assertive come and join us. When you're giving candidates all of this type of great content, you can not only lead them into the funnel, but if they're not looking for opportunities, then that's fine. You can nurture them for the medium term. And you can, the golden rule is, if you're giving them things that are going to help them with their career-related advice, industry insights, that type of stuff, if it's going to help them with their career, they're going to be interested and they're going to want to keep looking at your content. So the candidate career journey is absolutely non-linear, and if you're able to score, if you're able to give things to people as they want them, when they want them, in the channels and formats they want them, and you're able to score what they're doing and what they're looking at, it means that you're able to really start reducing your time to shortlist quite significantly. Here's an example of what's happened as a result of a simple campaign. So we put 552 people into the campaign that I showed you above, and by the end of that 4 weeks, 80 of those people were hot, 24 of them were hire ready. Very, very effective. I'm going to hand over to Polly, who's going to explain a bit more about, from there, once they've joined your organization, how do you go about engaging with talent in a way that's going to optimize their experience and their performance and make them big advocates for your employer brand?
Okay, thank you, Adam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I'm going to share with you today, I think, you know, Adam has just talked about this non-linear journey, which, you know, I agree, and we're all aware of how much information people can get about our organization. And, you know, I'm a massive advocate as well of the tools and some of the really amazing tools that underpin this, the amount of data that's available to us, and some of the ways that we can now automate the employee journey. But I guess none of that really as a practitioner helps, because so what I wanted to share with you today is how I think we can use some of these tools and recruitment content to create an experience which cuts through to candidates and creates for us a relationship with the type of people that we're trying to target and talk to. So a little bit of background about me. As Adam said, I spent the first 10 years of my career in in-house marketing roles and as a brand consultant, and then the last 10 years in talent and talent attraction. And for me, those are totally interchangeable, because talent and talent attraction is all about applying the right messages across every touchstone of either the candidate or the employee experience, so that it rings true, so that people believe you, and so that you are definitely delivering an experience either as a candidate or as an employee of an organization which rings true, that the things that you're telling people about yourself are actually the things that they experience. Most recently, I worked across 4,000 people across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But also, in a couple of roles back, I ran a brand ambassador staffing agency where we recruited and trained up people to represent some of the big kind of FMCG brands in retail spaces. So you know, that ambassador element has been something I think again that I bring to talent acquisition. And in my last role, I worked for a customer experience agency, so we did a lot of work around customer journeys and the touch points of those. That's something you see a lot of in the marketing and advertising world nowadays, but we were kind of at the forefront of that. So, you know, where I think I work is where these two disciplines join, and often that is around talent attraction. I really believe that, you know, you have to take that we can all learn a lot from marketing in the arena of talent attraction, that by having a customer-led approach, you know, and by customers I mean candidates, but thinking about them as our customers and trying to have insight into their behaviors and their drivers is really going to improve the way we go about our jobs and the experience ultimately for the people that we're trying to attract. And I also know from, you know, I've worked on a lot of really large scale, nearly always when I work with a business, it's in taking a business that wants to evolve its talent strategy, maybe introduce a new one, a business that's going through change. And the strategy itself is great, you know, this is what we stand for, this is how we want to be perceived. But I don't think those strategies live and breathe in organizations. I don't think that they change cultures or behaviors unless they're supported by great content. So by communications that have an emotional connection. And again, I think this is an area that just because of the lack of skills in this arena, communication skills in a standard talent team, it can often be overlooked. We put out great programs, we deliver great initiatives, but we struggle when it comes to translating and communicating those activities to our customers. And finally, you know, I love doing this across markets and countries, because how you deliver a program, a piece of engagement, a piece of content in London will be really different from how you do that in Berlin, will be different again from how you do that in Dubai, and there's lots of really interesting learning around that. And then just here's something about myself, and not a very good picture actually, but this is really relevant because aside from all of that professional stuff I just told you about, I come from the north. I have 2 kids, Sam and Violet. My husband is a photographer, and art and creativity are a massive part of my life. I'm a major breadwinner for my family. I run a lot of women's leadership programs. I'm a feminist. I consume a lot of literature and media made by women. I live in London, but I have always travelled from a really young age. I got sent abroad and did lots of exchanges and lived and worked abroad. And I still spend any money I can on a holiday or a trip somewhere. I studied English literature. And the reason I'm telling you all of these things is because I think they paint a much more interesting, diverse, and emotionally engaging picture of why I do what I do, other than my career experience. All of these things here play into why I work in talent. All of these things here play into why I work in marketing in talent. All of them play into why I'm really, really passionate about communication. So, you know, as a candidate, these are my drivers, these are my emotional triggers, and these are the kind of things that I'm really trying to get to in the marketing and communications that I have produced for businesses that I work for. And why I'm doing this is because I feel that we are in a transition currently. You know, there is an awful lot of talk, isn't there, about different drivers of employees today, and what we all want out of the world of work. But standard EVP programs, employer brand programs, I think are starting to slip in relevance. So, you know, I've worked both as a consultant and then with businesses where I've worked in talent acquisition. I've done an awful lot of workshops, an awful lot of focus groups around what's our value proposition, what do we stand for, what are our core values that we want everyone in this business to embody. And very often those workshops have involved the board. If they decide to go wider, what probably happens is I will talk to the board, and the board will say, well, you know, you should talk to so and so and so and so, who, you know, will be pretty corporate, pretty kind of flag waving members of the employee base. And from that, you deliver, you know, your values, and from that, a set of communications that talk about your culture. Now, you know, I know that there's much more sophisticated, deep-reaching programs going on around different parts of offering, but the point is, those are top-down. I think where we're heading is to really look at this the other way around. So in recent years, I've done work with businesses where we've started with the needs and the drivers of our people, and we've looked at what they are interested in, what they want out of the world of work, what they are hoping to gain from the job that they do, both in terms of skills and opportunity, and that flips the whole conversation on its head, and it makes it, I believe, a much more attractive one to candidates, because we're saying, you know, we're interested in you, we have the sort of things that you are interested in, and we have some challenges we think you'd like. So where this goes then, of course, is into the employee journey. And, you know, Adam has just talked through some of the other external drivers on this, but to break this down into an entire journey, I think you are looking at not only the first part of awareness of your business and how you can influence that through the application, interview and post-interview process, not just as a process, but as a journey of engagement, and one on which you can build and improve and influence people along the way. Then also, really fundamentally, once they come into the employee and become employees, once they come into your business, what that entire life cycle is of them being in your business, the experience of working, of career management, of how we help them fulfill their desires and their dreams, and out the other side. And you know, what I'm really focused on here is, you know, I remember when I first, in the dot-com boom, I went to join a web agency. And it was a startup out of the Guardian New Media Lab. So it was I think the first website in the UK, which shows how old I am. It was founded by journalists who worked at the Guardian New Media Lab. But everything that they taught me there was that the web or communications was a publishing exercise, that by creating these processes, by creating these opportunities, we are effectively creating the need to produce content. And that has to be not just, we'd like you to come to this interview, we'd like you to arrive here and at this time, but what is the sensation, what is the emotion, what is the opportunity to engage that we are creating at that point, and how are we going to structure our communications accordingly so that they have the most impact and so that we stand out from other people who are doing similar things. So that is, you know, the employee journey itself laid out in stages, but I think my message really is that there is so much more around that than just the opportunity to give some information. It's the opportunity to influence. So I'm going to bring you on to talk to you about how I have worked with businesses to create these targeted messages, you know, and how some learnings around how we can do that and make it more effective. And I think it all starts with this candidate or customer-led approach and really getting under skin of these individuals. What are these people interested in? What are the people that we are trying to target interested in? And, you know, before that, if you look at the standard kind of spray and pray approach to advertising or job advertising, a lot of those adverts are just saying, you know, we are targeting you because you work in this area and we need people in this area and maybe you need a job. Now, we know that, you know, only 1 in 4 people is actually looking for a job. So the answer to that really is, well, I don't need a job, and I'm not interested in that job at this current moment in time. So we need to dig a little bit deeper than that, and what we've done is then gone off to our interested candidates and talked to them about, so what are your drivers? What are the things that really motivate you? I was reading some interesting research recently, because, you know, there's a lot of talk about how younger people don't stay so long in roles anymore. In fact, most people don't stay very long in roles anymore. But this research absolutely debunked that. It said 47% of employees would prefer to stay with the business that they're in at the current moment in time. So part of that, and the reason they don't stay, is because the career opportunities don't exist, and that's where I stand around, you know, the experience of working in a business. But the other drivers are really interesting. It's a lot to do with social prowess and a belief in what your peer group is doing. So, you know, my perception now is that people around me are doing better than me. I want to be proud of what I'm doing. I want to share that socially. I want people to be aware of it. So, you know, that's a really interesting kind of generic driver that's out there in the candidate landscape at the moment. But what are, you know, the other groups, the other interests and challenges driving the groups of people that we're trying to target, is a question we ask at this stage. Also, is there a need to target a large group of people here, i.e., you know, around change programs? What we've done is we've gone and looked at our entire employee base. So everybody that works for us from a junior level, people who are looking to move into our business, and what are their drivers. Or we looked at, so Adam and I did some work together when we brought a new CEO into Germany. So we had to change that market around. We had to really challenge some of the things that were happening there and perceptions in the industry. So we took approach across 4 of our businesses in Germany and really looked at what was interesting people within Germany and how we could change perceptions of people hoping to join us there. So all of this is about how we create a more meaningful conversation around that for people. And how we do this then, having identified what it is that people are particularly interested in, what are the drivers here, I really come to feeling that authentic voices and stories are the way to do this. So trust is built in any relationship when we speak to people who we understand and believe in. Of course, some of that is going to come about as a result of the interview process and the people that you speak to and create a connection with. But it's how authentic would it be if a business then also introduces you to other people in the process and you hear from people in their own voices. Now, one of the challenges around this, of course, is when I first started talking to any business about doing this is, well, it's a risk. We're going to put people out there. They're going to become the spokesperson for our brand, and then they'll get headhunted. You know, the challenge to that, I guess, is twofold. Firstly, these people are being headhunted anyway. Everyone is being headhunted all the time, particularly you're hard to get people. And if we go back to that research about what makes people stay with a business, you know, people want to be proud of the business that they're in. People want to feel proud and talk about themselves, and they're far more likely actually to stay in a business where they're able to boast about what they're doing, where they're able to say, look at me, where they have the real sense of value, the value that is placed in them and their ability to be a spokesperson of it. I think especially for our tougher talent set, so we worked in marketing automation and data, and these are really, really competitive at the moment. There's huge growth in these areas, so everybody is trying to recruit. But, you know, when you're talking about those areas, people don't want to hear from a generic recruiter who's handling a lot of roles. It's really, really authentic for them to hear from somebody working in that area about why they chose to do that in our business, in that industry. So having that relationship and building that relationship is really powerful. But to do this, I think this comes back to the marketing thing. You can't get a group of people and say to them, right, you go off and start blogging, or you go off and start talking about business. We really had to create content and stories for these people to share in collaboration with them, but there's a huge confidence leap required if you're going to start talking about the business that you work in, and also if you're going to feel confident to put stuff out on channels which actually at the end of the day are owned by you, not by your business. To go on from this and to extend from this, we then had quite a lot of success in not only just creating the brand ambassadors, but in then bringing these people on as kind of mentors for people joining us in scarce talent sets, especially around senior female leadership recruitment, you know, where it's really, really great, especially in some sectors, to show people that you have other women in your business, and that you can, this is and for them to share authentically what their experience is like. Just a few other small points to consider here, but you know, when I also look at where to start, you know, so I'm really, really passionate about having an underpinning emotional engagement across all touch points of the employee journey, but also I, as a kind of looking at my own employee journey, candidate journey into our business, I found it really difficult to know where to start, because there is so much, you know, some of these content maps is, you know, 200, 300 pieces of unique content. And I don't really think you can start and attack all of these things at the same level all at once. Really interesting to know, if you look at the sales process, it's the beginning and the end of the sales process that are most remembered. So how can we, one question for us as in attraction is, how can we really impact on those 2 points in a way that makes us stand out from our competitors? You know, an area that I'm sure we all moan about, but interview feedback, you know, and the crucial nature of that. But the time that people think they are kept waiting is always psychologically more than they actually are kept waiting. And also the psychological impact of absence of information at that stage means that we make things up. We start to kind of make stories up about why we haven't got the information back, why we haven't had feedback yet, and that will lead to a massive decline in someone's emotional experience at that stage of the journey. You know, that's something for us to hammer home to line managers and to think about in our interview process. It's been one of the reasons why I have been a massive advocate of scheduled interview times when all of the interviewees meet the candidate at exactly the same point, and we have one form where we share feedback through that process. So at the end of 3 hours, we have all of the feedback that we would need for that entire process, and we can really come back to the candidate with conviction and with some impressive feedback. And then just to throw this in there, you know, we're talking about candidate experience. When we created brand ambassador experiences, when we created brand experiences, we always look to those to be multi-sensory. And I know it's a little bit facile, but you know, people talk about putting on a pot of fresh coffee to sell a house. It just made me wonder in thinking about these things. What happens if you went in? How could you make an interview process multi-sensory? You know, what could we add to those experiences that would really deliver something standout? So, using all of this kind of belief and knowledge, I'm then just going to talk you through what we did within my last business. So I have now 5 content types. Our need within Wunderman was that we were going to relaunch around our talent strategy. We're growing very quickly, and we needed a real way to place our positioning and our talent strategy in the minds of people that might be considering us. So we went away, we did a lot of research around people we had in our candidate database, also our existing employees, and looked to their drivers, overlaid with our culture. And out of this, we came up with 5 or 6 different character types that personified the kind of people that we wanted in Wunderman and that would be happy. So the first one of these are the 5 to 9ers. They're people who develop their businesses and their passions outside of their work. Second, entrepreneurs, people who are entrepreneurs inside our business. Globetrotters were those people who had gone from country to country, moved their careers, moved their roles, and were really making the most out of working for a massive organisation. The fourth are philanthropists, people who were giving time and money to good causes. That was a huge emotional driver for people within our business. Pathfinders, people who were finding their career paths within the organisation, so people who had joined to do one thing and then actually found a place and an area of interest in another department or in another team, and so moved and been supported to make that transition. And industry butterflies were people who had never considered working in our sector, but actually had come in from an external discipline and really found it enjoyable to them, probably because of their cultural drivers. So these content buckets proved really, really attractive to people within our business. When we created them, we shared them with the talent teams across the region, and really quickly those stories I was talking about started coming up. I would get calls saying, "Oh, I know, yeah, we've definitely got, you know, 3 or 4 5-to-9ers in our business. We've got someone who's moved from Denmark recently. She's definitely a globetrotter. She's gone off to, she went on holiday to Washington. She went and knocked on the door of our Washington agency, and she's got herself a job in the Washington agency." We had people climbing Kilimanjaro from our agency in Dubai. We had people who, actually one story that I love of a Pathfinder was somebody who had joined an HR team and found her vocation within strategy, which is quite unique, and I was really happy about that. We tend to be a little bit typecast in HR. So these became these buckets, these career personas became a way of individuals talking and finding the stories within our business. We then worked, I then worked with creative and content and copy to create content around these. So these GIFs that you can see here are also across all of the social media feeds for Wonderman at the moment, and they're the starting point of really sticky careers content, which talks about individuals in a way that they own and is authentically theirs, and also attracts the kind of people who will be right and happy at Wonderman. And as you can see, of course, the natural progression of this type of content is that these individuals, not only do they personify a particular persona in this type, but this also works for the type of discipline they're in. So Stacey, who you can see there shouting "Bonjour Paris," worked in our content team, and she had a particular specialism around emojis, and she went off to South by Southwest to talk about these emojis on behalf of the business, and she was very sponsored to explore her passions in what she did. So not only is she part of this generic program across the globe for the business, but she also has a role as a powerful advocate for people wanting to join the content team, and that's the extension of that piece of idea for her and her role within this. So you know, just as a sort of final point here, in terms of taking this forward and exploring the emotional drivers of the candidates, I think the first stage was our audit of current candidates, taking first-person views from them on their perceptions of us, the experience of working for us, and then from candidates on their external perceptions of us and what they'd like to see from us as an employer. Then we looked at our careers marketing against these desires. We were able to overlay the effectiveness and what we already had. When I'm talking about, you know, brand ambassadors and experts within our organization, so much content already exists, mostly used around the product marketing, which we can repurpose for careers marketing. So there's a lot there already. We did create some stuff that was a campaign in itself, which you've just seen, but it is possible also to then support that with a lot of the existing content we have. We looked at the key stages, that journey that I showed you of the organization, and at the emotional reactions we were wanting to provoke at each stage. So what are we trying to achieve at this stage of the process, not only in terms of the information we want to share, but how do we want somebody to feel at this stage of the process. And then finally, I think all of this is a steep mountain to climb. So my advice is to just look across all of this at 10 small changes, 10 areas, put a plan around implementing those, review those, and move forward. And then incrementally, the experience starts to improve. You don't need to do a wholesale redesign of all of the communications. We can start with a hard-to-get skills area. We can start to get with a particular group of people. We could start with a country. 10 changes there will improve the experience across the whole, and that moves you significantly forward. And over to you, Adam.
Great, thank you very much. All extremely interesting stuff. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'd like to invite all the people who have dialed in to submit their own questions. You can do so on the GoToWebinar panel, which is on your screen. Please just type any questions you've got in and I'll be able to see them. So, the first question I've got is, we talked about understanding geographical, well, we talked about the fact that, you know, talent attraction in London is going to be different to it will look in Berlin. Can you explain, how do you go about understanding those geographical differences, and how do you then go about landing campaigns that are appropriate for the different locations?
Well, I mean, I think it's as basic as listening. You know, a lot of when I first took, I've worked globally for the past 7 years, and this last role was the biggest number of people across EMEA. But the first thing that anyone ever tells me when I go anywhere is, oh, well, it's different here. Oh, well, that won't work here. Oh, well, we use different channels here. And I think, you know, the very first thing you have to do is to make that part of your audit. You know, that's as much part of understanding the candidate landscape. Well, it's entirely part of understanding the candidate landscape, and it's why the whole top-down approach doesn't work. You know, any kind of messaging that's conceived in one country and delivered as a strategy across the globe or across different disciplines is not going to be as effective. You know, everything within the marketing discipline talks about segmenting, everything talks about understanding your audience. So, you know, you have to listen is the kind of, I guess, really basic answer, I think, Adam, is to talk with the people in the market about what their particular challenges are, what people want there, and change accordingly. But having said all of that, I don't think people are so enormously different that means you then have to have something totally different. You just have to tweak and be sensitive and collaborate.
So one thing that we've found very interesting recently, it was Scott, my colleague Scott pointed out to me, and I've noticed it as well, is that in terms of the different companies that we work with, their decision making, even in the UK, their style of decision making is determined by the country of origin of that business. Mm-hmm. So in a Spanish-owned company, for example, there's a top-down kind of dictatorial sort of approach that happens, whereas in a Dutch company, there's much more of a collaborative sort of working culture, and then in a UK-based business, there's often a kind of best argument wins type of approach, regardless of who you are. On that point about people always say it's different here, do you think that's because people are just a little bit arrogant, or do you think it really is different in different organizations in different countries?
I think you have the most chance of success in selling in any kind of program at scale if you listen and collaborate with people and ensure that their concerns are listened to. So, I mean, I read it was a Harvard Business Review article recently too about exactly what you're talking about. I thought it was absolutely fascinating where it plotted all these different countries in terms of how decisions are made, and it made so much sense to me over things that I had felt like I'd tacitly understood in terms of working with people in all these different countries. So, you know, I think, but you know, irrespective. Very few businesses at that scale can deliver a total kind of command and control approach across every single region. They'd have to have something very tightly run to do that. And you know, it could be that some of that stuff is not very attractive to candidates. So, you know, that can actually lead to problems. You know, people don't want to work, for example. I mean, you know, all this research from LinkedIn shows that people in EMEA are not so interested in applying to a job that is from an American owner because it's perceived as being too far away. It's like, well, I work in France. How can I apply to this business that looks like it's totally based in New York? I don't want to work there. It doesn't have relevance. So I think, you know, you will find greater needs to be locally relevant, irrespective of what the culture is.
Okay, good. Here's a question from our friend Jane, who says, what questions did you ask to uncover the characteristics and career personas?
We talked about, so we held focus groups. We did some online focus groups, and we also did face-to-face ones. And we just talked about the literally people's hopes for the future, what their personal desires were, what their career ambitions were, and what the kind of things that they felt would be exciting. And I think one of the most powerful areas, really, if I'm honest, were when you look at people outside of the business, because it can be difficult. Whilst you do want to overlay that with the things that people find are authentic about working in the business. I think a little bit that people who I asked as head of talent, you know, what's your experience of working here? They're going to most likely give me a positive answer. And I'd also be worried about those people being handpicked for the workshop. I tried very hard to ensure that that wasn't the case. But, you know, in some cases, people are not going to put your disgruntled person in front of you or your restless person in front of you. They're going to give you their star pupil, as it were. So, you know, we asked the standard questions about career motivators, ambitions for the future, and whether or not they felt the business was delivering that. But we did it with two different groups of people, internal and external.
Okay. So you talked about social prowess as being a kind of key driver in how candidates feel about, you know, their career and what they want to do. What are the other sort of key things that people want in their career, or is it far too varied to say? And is that why you created the personas? Sorry, lots of questions in one.
No, I mean, you know, one of the things I hear a lot, and one of the things that I think that businesses are struggling with is career management. You know, when you say what do people want, they want to feel that they have a career progression. But the challenge within that is that by that they don't necessarily mean the standard career ladder. So it's difficult, and I think that's a massive challenge for businesses at the moment, to deliver something that feels like a career-enhancing experience while people are working for them, but isn't tied around, well, you move from, you know, executive to manager to director to whatever else, isn't a laddered approach. So to me, though, this really plays to this whole idea of enabling people to create their own brands. So we did some really interesting workshops in the business I was before last around helping people manage their own careers and helping them manage their own career profiles. You know, I think that individuals who don't do that are not going to have a career in 10 years' time, and even amongst kind of more junior people, there's a people are finding it difficult to share on social media as much as you need to talk about what they're doing, to share their thinking. And that's something that, you know, I think plays to both sides. People have a well-managed career because they manage their career well. But what you can do as an employer is help them do that more effectively.
Okay. I completely get that. Our friend Bill Burman said on the Recruiting Animal Show a couple of months ago that he had done some research into millennials specifically, and they're certainly not driven by money. They absolutely want to know, how is this job opportunity going to help me develop? How is it going to help make me more marketable in the future, and help develop my skills and all that kind of thing? So I'm hearing that quite a lot. Another question from Ben Gledhill, who says, great webinar, Polly. As many have said, the day of the large EVP is coming to an end, with the emphasis on individual stories and propositions across the organization. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I'm wholly in that camp. Yeah, I mean, I don't, you know, it's also just, we're all cynical, aren't we, as well? You know, I've seen so many videos where there is some head of talent and head of marketing standing in front of a trendy wall saying, oh, this is a great place to work and we've won these awards. And, you know, the experience inside the business quite often doesn't bear up to that soundbite. So, you know, the concentration on a really transparent approach to, this is what we can offer you, this is what we hope you'll get out of it, keep up the dialogue, that's massively important. And yeah, I think you want to hear from the people who are in the business rather than necessarily all of the figureheads, although of course the leadership is important too, to know it's well managed. But yeah, this is my whole focus. I think we're moving away from that.
All right, so Ben's added a supplementary comment, which is, tell Polly loving her work, can tell she's a northern lass, common sense prevails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, one other question. It's about, okay, so it's from Alistair Blair, and the question's about content. So, and the difficulty of getting good writers and content creators to put together all this sort of stuff to engage people. I mean, for you in the past, you've worked in content businesses, so that's probably been quite useful, I would think. But what's your take on that? Because you need to be creative, and talent, HR and talent teams often don't have people that can do any of this creative stuff.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
No. Yeah, I don't think it's a natural or a usual skill set in the talent team. It's one that obviously it's in my own team, that's what my background, but I think it's a role that in the future we'll see people recruiting in. You do also, I really enjoy working with the marketeers in our business, but they totally, I would say for a large extent, the problem is that they don't live and breathe, and why should they, candidate attraction. So they miss, no matter how passionate they are about the brand communication, they miss the essential element of understanding what the candidate market is and what's driving that. So, this interface between talent and marketing, I think, is really pivotally important in the future. And also, like you're talking about with the content, the ability to act as an internal customer for the creatives to create this content is another really important role for the talent team, because we know the candidates, we're under the skin of them, we talk to them all the time, we understand the marketplace, we understand the drivers and the desires, but we have to be able to translate that into a really compelling brief, to create the kind of content that we did at Wunderman, you know, and you have to really push that. So, you know, even that work that I've just showed you, and you can see on social channels on Instagram, that was a really large piece of work. It took me a long time to build the case for doing that and to convince people of why, and that was, you know, forming that bridge that you're talking about to create the kind of content that you actually need.
Yeah. Okay. Another one from me, which is about multi-sensory brand experiences. Literally putting a coffee aroma into your interview area. You know, is that a good thing to do? What are some of the actual tactics that might be useful in creating a multi-sensory experience?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was being a bit facetious there because I was just, I've been thinking a lot about the extension of the candidate experience here. But then I actually don't think it's such a stupid thing to think about. You know, if you're really going to ensure that every part of your candidate experience is standout, how many times would the interview take place in a faceless meeting room? You know, how many times does that part of the experience not support every other thing that you're trying to do? You know, if we're being as creative as possible in order to achieve cut-through, that is definitely something that I would build in to think about how we can stand out. And maybe it's a cup of coffee and some biscuits, I don't know, as opposed to a bottle of water thrust in your hand. But
yeah, a bottle of wine.
Yeah. Well, I think but I think probably I've worked in quite a few businesses that have tried that experience.
Yeah. I suspect it doesn't go down with young people as well as it used to, but anyway. Okay, look, thank you very much for your time. That's been absolutely brilliant, Polly. I've really enjoyed hearing from you again. And for all the people that have joined us today, I hope that you've also found it useful. We've had some great comments here. And feel free to connect with Polly online. Feel free to connect with me online. And you know, ask either of us any further questions if you've got. I hope it's been really useful, and look out for our next Talent Talk, which is next week with Neil Daly from EDF Energy, who is going to be talking about something to do with talent attraction, I guess. But look out for it on social media and by email. And thank you all very much. Bye for now.
Thanks, bye.